welcome to Time Travel Tuesday. My name is Emery, and this week in our Billings Farm at Home series, we're celebrating draft animals. And what a better way to do that than to make something that farmers and their families would have enjoyed at home. So today we're making two different recipes. We're going to make Shoofly Pie and then a drink called Switchel. So first we're going to start with the pie because of course that needs to bake in the oven. So let me walk you through the ingredients that I've measured out and we'll get going on Shoofly Pie. So for our pie filling, we have 3/4 of a cup of molasses. We have a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and then to that a little later on we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of boiling water. Now these are the ingredients for the pie crust. I know pie crust might scare some people, but it's really easy and we're going to make it together. So in the bowl here I have 1.5 cups of flour, 8 tablespoons of butter. Right in here is 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and then 2 to 3 tablespoons of ice water. Always do more than you need, but the cold water helps keep the butter chilled so it doesn't mix into your pie crust and therefore not make it nice and flaky, but it'll be short and sort of crumbly. And then lastly, this is the pie topping, almost like a crumble topping. We have in this bowl 1.5 cups of flour, 1/2 cup of dark brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. It might look a little different because I use freshly grated nutmeg. I have 1/8 teaspoon of salt, and then we have 4 ounces of softened butter. Again, I left my butter out overnight, and then it'll be easier to incorporate in my filling or in my topping. So first step in the recipe is to take our cold butter, 8 tablespoons, which is about a stick of butter, add that to our flour, sugar, and salt. I'm going to do that right now. And then if you have a fork, great, but this is sort of a pastry cutter. It cuts the butter evenly into the flour. So I'm just going to demonstrate, and then we'll come back after I have incorporated all the butter into the flour. So I've just about cut in all of our butter. Tap off my blender here. As you can see, the little butter chunks are nicely incorporated into the flour. Some are big, some are small. That's sort of what you want, difference in size, because as the butter melts, the steam from the butter will create a little pocket in between the flour and make a really nice flaky crust. If you have butter chunks that are a little bit too big, you can always smush it between your fingers with a little flour just to make it a little smaller. Next step is to add our water. Again, I'm using ice water. Ice water helps keep the butter cold so that way it doesn't melt into the flour and create that crumbly crust and not a flaky crust. So I'm going to make a little well in the center of my pie crust and then add my 2 to 3 tablespoons of water. In the winter time, the air is a lot drier, so you're going to need probably the maximum amount of water in a recipe. In the summertime, since the air is moister, you're going to need a little less, so that's probably when you'll add just the 2 tablespoons. So I'll start with 3. Don't be afraid to add a little bit more water if you think your dough isn't coming together well. So to make a nice smooth dough and without overmixing it, I'm just going to take my hand and sort of press, going around the bowl, pressing into the center and incorporating the water. And you don't want to make a tough crust, so that's why I'm using my hands and just gently folding everything together. Once this mixture is all incorporated and smooth, without overmixing, I'm going to turn it out onto a piece of saran wrap and then put it in the fridge to chill for a half an hour before rolling it out to put in my pie pan. While our pie crust is chilling in the refrigerator, I'm going to teach you all how to make a drink called Switchel. Switchel was basically the Gatorade for farmers back then. It helped you replace vitamins and sugar and electrolytes that would have been lost working in the field on a hot day. So the recipe is extremely simple. Here I have measured out 2 tablespoons of honey. The darker spot is 2 tablespoons of molasses. We have 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and then 3/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. And the rest of it is a little hot water. So I'm going to dump my honey and molasses into my mason jar, all the way at the bottom. scraping it all out with a rubber spatula. Very sticky. Next, I'm going to add the apple cider vinegar and the ginger. Into the mason jar, we're going to put a little bit of hot water. The hot water, we're going to throw the lid on it and shake it around. The hot water helps to dissolve the honey and the molasses in your recipe. So quick, throw a lid on it. There we go. And then give it a good shake around. As you can see, the honey and the molasses start to incorporate. Give it a good turn just to make sure you're getting everything off of the bottom. Almost there. Perfect. Now the rest of the jar we're gonna fill until it reaches the full 4 cups, which is a quart, with cold water. And then throw the lid on it, put it in the refrigerator, and when it's nice and chilled, we'll have Switchel to go with our Shoofly Pie, which will come out of the oven a little bit later. So the other thing we can do while we're waiting for our crust to chill in the fridge is to prepare the crumb topping that'll go on top of the pie right before it goes in the oven. Again, it's the flour, the brown sugar, and the spices, and then 4 ounces of butter. So my butter is nice and soft. So basically this is where you get a little down and dirty and you mix it all with your hands. So I'm going to incorporate the sugar in with the flour, mix all that in, and then throw my butter in. And you're going to mix it with both hands until it resembles a coarse cornmeal-like mixture. So here we have our chilled pie dough out of the plastic. We're gonna roll it out. What you'll need is a little side dish of flour, and just give that an even sprinkle on the table. Pie crust down, and then a nice sprinkle on the top. And to make sure we don't overwork our pie dough, we're just gonna give it a nice gentle roll, sort of from the center to the outside, working around so your pie dough becomes nice and flat, very even, and it'll be a little bit bigger than the pie pan that you're working with. Don't be afraid to give it a turn and just work from the center outwards in sort of a circular pattern. As you can see, our pie crust is all rolled out. It's a nice and thin layer. All the edges look pretty even. Now an easy way I'm going to show you to transfer the pie crust to your pan is using a rolling pin instead of using your hands, which might rip some of the pie crust dough. So you're going to take your rolling pin, place it on top of your dough, lift up one of the edges, and then give it a gentle roll all the way up onto your pie or rolling pin, and then roll it right back over your tin that has for your pie. And then we'll press it all into the center. Make sure it's all nice and even. And then trim the outside edge right to the edge of the pan with the back of a knife. As you can see, my pie crust is ready in the tin. I've trimmed the edge and then also crimped the edge. So crimping is just taking 2 fingers and then sort of pinching and then twisting. One hand goes towards you, one hand goes away from you. Your thumbs do most of the work. So it's all ready for our filling, which we're gonna make now. Our oven is preheated to 450 degrees. The filling is very simple. We're just gonna mix the baking soda right in with the molasses and 3/4 of a cup of boiling water. Super nice and hot, just came off the stove. And then we're gonna give that a good whisk around together just to make sure everything's nice and incorporated. It'll help The hot water will help the molasses melt, and you can see it's foaming up. So that's the reaction with the water and the baking soda and the sugars that are in the molasses. So we're gonna give it a good whisk around. You can see it's foaming up, so the baking soda is doing all the work it's supposed to. That creates a nice airy filling. So once you don't feel any more resistance on the bottom, which means your molasses is melted, we're gonna pour our pie filling into the crust. As you can see, it's super frothy and foamy. That's the work of all the baking soda mixing with the sugars. And then we're gonna take our crumble topping. Remember, we mixed it with our hands, so it was a nice coarse cornmeal mixture, and then sprinkle that evenly right over the top. Some of it definitely will sink down into your pie, but that is completely okay. You just want a nice even layer all around. So this is what our pie looks like after you get all of the topping on. Do take your time with the topping because there is a lot in the bowl. Just make sure you sprinkle it nice and evenly around. Don't be afraid of a thick layer because it'll sort of bake down once it goes into the oven. Now, like I said, I've preheated my oven to 450 degrees. We're gonna bake the pie at that temperature for 15 minutes. The high heat seals in the crust and helps the outside cook so you don't get a soggy bottom. If any of you watch the Great British Baking Show, you'll definitely know why. After the 15 minutes are up, we're gonna turn the oven temperature down to 350, keep the pie inside, and bake it for another 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. You just want the filling to be set up and nice and firm. And then after that, we can enjoy some nice warm shoofly pie. So our delicious shoofly pie has come out of the oven. As you can see, it's great golden brown. Some points, especially around the edge and then right here in the middle where the crumb mixture wasn't completely evenly spread, you're gonna have little pops of the molasses filling coming out, but it's still going to be delicious. So once it cools, we'll be able to cut into it. Feel free to serve it with a little whipped cream if you would like. Don't sweeten it, it's entirely your choice. And you might be wondering why shoofly pie is called shoofly pie. Well, basically the molasses was so sweet that all the flies in the area would come and sort of crowd around the pie, and then you'd have to go shoofly and sort of knock them out of the way, hence the name shoofly pie. So happy baking this recipe. You'll find it on our website, and we will see you back next week for Time Travel Tuesday. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it in the comments below, and happy baking!